Hey guys, Alicia here. I'm hiking up to Sage Pass in Waterton Lakes National Park. Check it out. It's so pretty this morning. And I thought I would film a chunk of a video talking about all the mistakes I made during my first ultra, or my first 50K. But a little disclaimer to start off with, while I was thinking about this, I kind of felt not qualified to talk about it because I've only done 5 50K races at that distance, and probably like 10 50 plus kilometer days on trails in total. So I feel like compared to a lot of more experienced folks, I'm still a noob, full noob status. But that doesn't mean I didn't learn from that first one. So I will spend some time talking about the mistakes I made for my first 50K. The race itself was in Helena, Montana. It consisted of 2 loops. I'll show the map. I'll put the map up. And it was really fun. My hubby came down with me. As always, the best crewman ever. And we had some friends actually come up and meet us because one of their buddies was running it too. And so it was just a really fun atmosphere, super low-key event. Highly recommend it. My first mistake was not checking out the course map and profile closely enough when I was planning my training and then when I was actually doing the run. Now, I didn't get lost or anything. They had the course well marked. And, I survived the distance. Didn't feel very good near the end. But now I know as soon as I sign up for a run to look at each leg of the 50K, each portion, check out what the elevation profile looks like. And then when I'm training, the closer I get to my day, the more similar those trails want to look to the actual event. So this course is really cool. It's kind of 2 loops, sort of snowman-esque, and it wasn't 50K. It was, I think, 52K, and my watch read 54 by the end of the race, which is common. Your GPS watch isn't always right. But what happened was those last 4 kilometers from 50 to 54 felt harder than anything I've done in my entire life. I was expecting the finish line from 50K to 54K. And even though that section of the race was actually an out and back on the same trail, I didn't even recognize it. I was so tired and then mentally defeated because I was, had it in my mind that as soon as I hit 50.0, I would see that finish line. So that was a growing moment. The other thing was the course had a lot more up and down than I expected. I was expecting a couple big climbs and a few big descents, and there was more undulating up and down on the course itself. So if you signed up for a 50K or any trail race, know that a flat 50 is going to run a lot different than a steep 50. And look at the course profile, look at how much elevation it is. Use your mapping resources to try out other trails, like map other trails, see what their elevation profile looks like compared to the race you're running. And that's going to help you big time. A, just be mentally prepared for what you're about to take on, and B, to train properly for what you're about to do. All right, a little further down the trail, check that bad boy out. Okay, sorry. And my second mistake that I made during my first ultra had to do with fueling. And today is an example of how I've changed. When I did my first 50, I didn't eat until like 3 hours in was my first snack, because I figured I was working at a lower intensity. And when I did my marathon, I did it in about 3.5 hours and I didn't fuel at all. So I just took that logic to the trail. So I won't need to eat till about 3 hours in. And I bonked, man. I had a very hard time in the second half of the race with feeling like I just totally was out of energy. Yo, check out Font. It's so cool. Anyways, so like today I have already had, I'm 3 hours in, 3.5. I've already had roughly 60 grams of carbs, 35 grams of protein, and a touch bit of fat as well. And I plan to have a lot more before the race is done. I remember this one moment, or not race, the day. Look at that, Matkin. You're so pretty. I remember on that race day, I got to this aid station and I saw they had Fig Newtons. I'd had Fig Newtons like once in my life before. And that Fig Newton tasted better than any Fig Newton I've ever eaten in the entirety of my life. And if that happens during a race, probably means you got behind nutrient-wise on something. And that's why you're craving some sort of food. I think for me, honestly, it was just the sugar that I needed. And so if you fuel early and often, and you do a calculation or do some training runs and test what kind of fuel feels best for you, then you are going to rock that first ultra. So pretty. Huh. Okay, onward. All right, and my third mistake that I made during my first ultra was equipment-wise. Now, I have strong opinions on equipment, and anyone I know knows that about me. I think it's the way the craftsman uses the tools, as opposed to having the best tools. And I think that's something that was instilled in me since I was young. So for that reason, oh, this trail is so cool. I don't think that having if you want to run an ultra, you don't need to run out and grab and buy all the fancy gear for an ultra in order to do it. That being said, here I am 5 years after I ran my first ultra, and I've got the pack, I've got a handheld, I have a different watch than I started with. So over time I have acquired gear. I have a lot more pairs of runners than I used to, all Merrells, but I do have a lot more than I used to have. But for my first ultra, I ran it with what my friends affectionately, or maybe not affectionately, called my school backpack. And it was, I'll put a picture of it right here. I love it so much. It's a backpack I used as my school backpack, my skiing backpack, my hiking backpack, my running backpack. I used it for everything. The thing I didn't anticipate was a big pack like that, when you're doing 50K, will chafe like a, So I finished that race with a lot of chafing on my low back and on my shoulders. So if I was to go back and do it again, I would borrow a friend's running vest maybe, or from the last aid station to the finish line, I dump the pack. I don't think you need fancy gear to start. I don't think you should let that hold you back. In fact, I ran my first ultra in a pair of road runners, and it was fine because it was trails like this. I'm not saying be underprepared. If you're gonna do big wilderness runs, you want the right equipment for that so that you can be safe. When you buy that equipment, support your local gear store for sure. However, I think that you should try and use what you have. See if it works first before you go and buy bigger, better, fancier things. My 2 cents. However, probably would have had more fun if I wasn't red on my entire low back and shoulders. So those are the 3 mistakes that I made during my first ultra, my first 50K. I'm sure there are lots of mistakes in my future as well, but if you can learn from those, and if you can realize that you're probably going to make mistakes, you might look a little stupid like I did with my school backpack, but it'll be fun to try anyways, then you should give it a go. I think a long trail run is a phenomenal way to push yourself, realize what you're capable of, and explore an area that you love. So don't let it hold you back. Please learn from these and have a wilder week. We'll see you guys next time.